Just before Christmas, I entered a game making competition where I only had half an hour to program the whole game. So I could get the graphics, the audio, the music, the backgrounds all done before I started. However, I misread the rules and I thought it started on the 22nd, but it actually ended on that day. So I had far less time than everyone else to prepare all those assets. So I spent about 2 hours doing that, and then I got to work on the half-hour coding session, which I recorded in its entirety over on the Cubicle Brothers video website page thing, if you want to see it. Cut.
Let's go, ho ho.
So my game was a simple Christmas-themed entry where you run about as Santa, delivering presents to all of the houses on the level without letting the evil snowmen touch you. They run straight at you, but get blocked by stuff on the screen. And you can shoot them, using whichever weapon you've been equipped with for that particular level. I managed 3 stages in total, each getting faster and more difficult than the one before it. And in case you were wondering, the music used is from my dad's new album. It will be released sometime in the new year, but right now I'm just trying to familiarise myself with the songs. And I've got to say I've grown fond of this track simply by featuring it in this game. The rules of this competition were to make a game in half an hour and to upload a video of yourself doing it, presumably to prevent cheating. Half an hour game making is unexplored territory for me. I've made games in 2 hours before, though I did the graphics in that time as well. Turns out that bit of it is a necessary but incredibly dull time sink, and is probably the bit that makes the biggest difference to how good the final game feels to play. I hope this competition isn't rated too heavily on the graphical assets, firstly because mine are rubbish, and secondly because it's got nothing to do with the half-hour time element of the competition. I've been using FaceApp to age my face, making for an excellent, decrepit-looking Santa, which serves to decorate the screens and also to add a touch of dankness to an otherwise fairly dull game file. I was also aware that, having had several weeks to make this game, other people would probably have done the half-hour coding session several times, meaning they could fine-tune their game, learn to avoid the problems associated with it, and generally to produce a much more polished half-hour game and recording than I could have done, having left it to the last minute and attempted it only once. So how do you ensure that you get a game done in half an hour? How do you pace yourself? And here's the secret. You don't. You start and are all like, go, 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 and you keep that up for half an hour. I've talked before about crunch time and its miraculous powers of productivity, and this competition is half an hour of that. I have extensive experience with the Game Maker, so I can do most things in it quite quickly. And I set out to have the bulk of the game done in 15 minutes, so I could spend the remaining time testing and adding more, but unnecessary content to it. At the beginning of the project, you can see that I'm copying the graphics over from another game file, which is perfectly allowed, not breaking any rules there. But what was this file? Well, this was where I drew the graphics, obviously, but also where I experimented with the gameplay I wanted my entry to have. I want to say that it wasn't a finished or even playable version of the game by any stretch of the imagination. It was just a place for me to test bits of the project that I thought I would have difficulties with. For instance, when Santa touches a house, it lights up. It would be more elegant just for it to change its animation when this happens. But I decided it was simpler to swap it out for a completely different model, so that I could move on to the next level once all the original house models had been destroyed, and so on. In game making, there are many ways of doing the same thing, but this approach was the best for me because it was the fastest to implement and least likely to go wrong if I changed the number of houses or whatever else might happen later on in the project. And if I hadn't made a test file like this for the game, I would have forgotten stuff like the pop animation when a snowman dies, because I don't think about that kind of stuff until I'm testing a game. And in a half-hour project, by then it's too late to draw it from scratch. And also the menus. I needed a main menu, a game over screen, and a game complete screen. I could have made and typed these up during the half-hour game making session, but it made a lot more sense to treat these as graphics objects by pre-making images for each of these that I could just copy over, complete with pre-written text and instructions, and a sound effect to flesh these screens out with. With enough time and effort, I'm sure I could have really abused this pre-made graphics aspect of the competition, especially if I made a game like Myst, where it's all about the graphics and exploration. But I think my project was quite sensible with what was pre-made and what wasn't. It didn't take the piss. So with these assets pre-made, I did have a general idea of the game I wanted to make and how it would turn out. Half an hour isn't long enough for me to be able to make levels for it. Again, I could have pre-made entire levels graphically beforehand, but I didn't. So I opted instead for randomly placed trees, enemies and houses, and a map that was large enough to make it challenging for you to find them all, but not too big that it gets frustrating. I made it so that the enemies spawned slightly faster than you could kill them, and that made it quite a frantic but fun little shooter game. In the back of my mind, there are potential problems. What if trees spawn inside a house? What if a house spawns on your player? And so on. Again, you have to weigh up the chances of this happening and act accordingly. If there wasn't such a fierce time restriction, then of course I'd have devised an elegant solution to this. But as it was, I deleted trees that spawned on stuff and assumed that if a house spawned on a player then it wouldn't cause a problem, and hoped for the best. I wasted a lot of time here. I was looking for the close button to close the graphics file I was borrowing from, but for some reason I couldn't see it. I guess because I was panicking because I was under time constraints. I can obviously see it now, but this was one of those bits where I wasted a lot of time in a way that will confuse anybody watching because it isn't apparent what I'm trying to do, nor exactly why I need to do it. Because I don't. At around the 15-minute mark, I had a working game. I briefly tested it to ensure that it all worked roughly as intended, then set to work making extra levels for it, because I thought I was fast enough to be able to add them, and that this would be the feature that would make the judges wonder how the hell I managed to cram all this into half an hour. Different weapons, different levels, different challenges. It seems a shame to make a game engine than not to add this sort of variety to it. I made the second level feature a shotgun, which fired multiple bullets at once but took longer to reload. I also upped the speed of the snowmen and the rate at which they spawned at, meaning that you had to kill several of them with one shot if you wanted to stand a chance. I also increased the number of trees just to make the level feel a bit different to play, and also because blocking snowmen behind these trees is a valid gameplay feature. And for the final level, I increased the number of houses Santa has to visit to 20, dropped the tree cover, and gave you a fast-firing machine gun. I also made snowmen run even faster. None of this stuff was tested beforehand. I just had to guess the correct values, and I think it worked, because it's definitely the fastest and most difficult level of the lot. But it still doesn't feel unfair. It might have been a half-hour game-making competition, but only half of that was spent coding it. The other half was spent playing, testing and fixing. It worked well for the snowmen to have large hitboxes so that they got stuck on stuff, and for Santa to have a tiny hitbox so that he isn't killed unless snowmen are literally right inside him. I described this choice as being forgiving. But I soon discovered that having trees and houses block your bullets was infuriating. It was much better for the snowmen to still be blocked by those elements, but for it to work in your favour by you still being able to shoot through them, and I felt it improved the gameplay immensely to give the player this advantage. I caught a few bugs too. Fortunately not COVID, but I did catch bugs like where the victory scene then jumps to the game over, which would have made for a very unhappy ending. And towards the end of testing, Santa finally spawned inside a house, and was completely unable to move. And this was more game-breaking than I thought it would have been, so I botched his movements that touching a house would transport him backwards. This is a trade-off. It fixes this game-breaking bug, and others like it, but makes his movement feel slightly buggier the rest of the time. Again, a more elegant solution could have been found had there been more time. I didn't see the need to cut this game-making competition too finely, so I finished and compiled the exe file at the 28-minute mark. And there it is, a half-hour game. I notice a few bugs still remain. It says level 2 when it should say level 3. And Santa does have a running animation, but I forgot to feature it so he just slides about the level instead. This is the sort of detail that I'm rubbish at spotting because it doesn't affect gameplay in the slightest. And even when I do spot it when testing the game, by the time I'm finished playing it, I've forgotten about it and typically have something more important on my mind that needs fixing instead. So of course I'd have liked for more time to polish and to test it. You might look down on this little game, but I'd argue this gameplay is better than in most of the games that I've made, because it doesn't outstay its welcome, and because its simple challenge and gameplay is quite satisfying to master. And perhaps more importantly, the difficulty of it feels right, compared with all those more advanced games I've made where either it doesn't pose a challenge, or it takes so long to master the gameplay that most people won't bother with it. So yeah, I finished and then I submitted the game and the video of me making it, and a few days later, Clickteam themselves emailed me, asking for the source recording. There are only two reasons why they would have done this. Either they couldn't figure out how to rip the video off YouTube directly, or because they thought I was cheating, and I have to admit I am pretty damn fast, so I'll just assume it's that because it helps inflate my already bulbous ego. I took part in this competition because it felt like a great opportunity to spend a couple of hours making games. It challenged me to do something I've never done before, and I felt the strict time limit would have limited the quality of the games enough that my silly little idea might still stand a chance. But I also made it because it gives me something to look forward to. Until the results are announced in January, I can sit back knowing I've got something to look forward to, and that alone justifies the time I've invested.